Previously on My Fellow Nigerians.
All aware of the circumstances which led to the change in the leadership of the government of this country, and I need not to repeat it here. Let me first of all congratulate all of you for a well-deserved appointment as members of the Armed Forces Ruling Council, a body which now replaces the former Supreme Military Council as the highest ruling organ of government. As members of the highest ruling organ of government, you are directly in the focus of the keen and watchful eyes of the public for your conduct of public affairs, your utterances, and general behavior. I, therefore, expect of all of you at all times loyalty, good conduct, and exemplary leadership qualities.
Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida was born to Gwari parents on August 17, 1941, in Minna, Niger State. His parents were Muhammad Badamasi Babangida and Ina Aishatu Babangida. His father, Muhammad, was born in Wushishi in Niger and later migrated to Minna. He was the eldest of 6 children and was not born into affluence. Of those 6 children, 4 died as infants, and his sister, Hanatu Bello, is his only surviving sister. In 1950, Babangida began his primary school education at the Native Authority School in Minna, where his classmates included another future general and head of state, Abdulsalami Abubakar. While still at primary school, Babangida had his first brush with the military when army recruiters came to his school as part of a recruitment drive to encourage northern youths to join the army. They encouraged Babangida and his classmates to join the Nigerian military school, then known as the Boys Company, but his family decided that Babangida was too young to enroll. He would get another chance later. After leaving the Native Authority School in 1956, Babangida gained admission to the Provincial Secondary School Bida in 1957. Once again, the army recruiters came to speak to the students on the merits of a military career. The recruiters were accompanied by a government minister and a smartly uniformed Northern infantry officer. The message from the recruiters was that if the students worked hard, one day they'd become army officers like the uniformed young officer standing before them. The young officer presented to the students was one Lieutenant Yakubu Gowon. This time, Babangida took the bait. He and 15 of his school colleagues sat the entrance examination for admission into the Nigerian Military Training College in Kaduna, and 11 passed, including Abdulsalami Abubakar, Maman Vatsa, Garba Duba, Gado Nasku, Sani Bello, Mohammed Magoro, and Sani Sami. Babangida found his niche in the army. While at the NMTC, he met a diminutive, quiet Kanuri man from Kano, with whom he would conspire to forever change Nigeria's political direction. The man he met was Sani Abacha. Babangida's coursemates at the NMTC, together with his classmates from the Government College Bida, formed a formidable cabal of coup-plotting officers that would dominate Nigeria's political and military life for the next 4 decades. Babangida was the first Nigerian ruler to come to power by design rather than by chance. He was at that time the only Nigerian military leader that actively sought political power prior to coming to office, prepared for it and waited patiently for it to come his way. All of Nigeria's previous leaders had power inadvertently thrust on them. Balewa became prime minister due to the Sardauna of Sokoto's lack of interest in the job, and even shed tears when reappointed prime minister in 1964. Agwe Ironsi, Gowon, and Murtala Mohammed had power bestowed on them after coups they did not take part in. Obasanjo became head of state after the assassination of Murtala Mohammed, and Major General Buhari was nominated as head of state by the faction which planned and executed the December 1983 coup. Even the elected President Shagari originally had no interest in becoming president, but was nominated as the NPN's presidential candidate. Babangida's rise to power was no twist of fate and occurred by deliberate planning and design. He was probably the most prepared military ruler in Nigeria's history. Babangida had been building a political empire for years inside the barracks. He created an army in his own image, largely through personal charm and his spontaneous acts of kindness to colleagues and subordinates. His extremely amiable personality, effusive charm, and one bonhomie won him immense popularity and respect in Nigeria military and political circles. He was genuinely kind and an excellent conversationalist who wore an ever-present smile in private, official, and social gatherings with both military and political circles. He is known to have an exceptional memory for names and faces, and is able to recollect the first names of hundreds of colleagues, subordinates, opponents, and even their wives and other family members. Babangida's charm gave him more appeal to senior and mid-level officers than the disciplinary Buhari, so he was able to gain broad support for his new regime by using his skill at human relationship to build a formidable network of contacts across the country. Nigerian military regimes usually seek to gain the public acceptance and popularity by discrediting their predecessors and by making grandeur promises of populist policy changes.
I'm pleased to take this opportunity to declare once again, therefore, that this administration attaches the greatest importance to constructive and helpful criticisms as well as the freedom of the press, and to declare further that the administration also attaches the greatest importance of fundamental human rights.
Babangida understood these rules of the game and that in Nigeria, what a leader said was almost as important as what he did. He was a master of spin and presentation and always seemed to say the right thing. He continually massaged the public's ego by telling them what they wanted to hear. He later explained that when you stage a coup, you have to tell the people what exactly they want to hear so you can get accepted. Babangida exuded confidence and appeared politically sophisticated. He gave the appearance of a man who knew what he was doing. He was a workaholic early riser who started work at 8 a.m. and continued working and holding meetings up until late hours of the night, often as late as 2 a.m. His first political acts were aimed at gaining public acceptance and presenting himself as a smiling general and benevolent dictator. He created a panel to review the cases of politicians convicted and jailed of corruption by special military tribunals during the Buhari era. Following the panel's reports, he released the jailed politicians. He was sensitive to the role the press played in destabilizing the Shagari and Buhari governments, so he immediately tried to get the press on his side. He repealed Decree 4 and released journalists Tunde Thomas and Nduka Irabo, who had been convicted and jailed for contravening the decree. Babangida further ingratiated himself with the press by using the head of national security, Brigadier Aliyu Mohammed, to build rapport with prominent reporters in order to secure favorable reporting for the government. In contrast to the sternly serious press briefings conducted by Buhari and Idiagbon, Babangida's government maintained informal contact with the press. This supposedly open-door policy to the press gained immense media praise for the Babangida regime in the early days. Babangida also suspended the execution of drug dealers, set 1990 as the date for the return of civilian democratic rule, inaugurated a political bureau, and encouraged public debate on the future democratic model for Nigeria. These measures made him immensely popular during his early days, and he was hailed as a liberal and enlightened military ruler with a genuine concern for human rights and with an intricate reform agenda. In portraying himself as a listening president who valued public opinion, he invited public debates on the nation's economic policy and how to deal with the over $20 billion foreign debt that Nigeria had accrued, and whether to seek a rescue loan from the International Monetary Fund. Babangida was sensitive to the resulting public opposition to the IMF loan, so he rejected it. The move proved popular with the macho patriotism of the public, but the ever-shrewd Babangida and his finance minister, Kalu Idika Kalu, imposed a set of economic reforms called the Structural Adjustment Program, SAP. They were even more punishing than those the IMF had demanded. Babangida's appointment of the Igbo Navy officer, Commodore Ebitu Ukiwe, as his deputy was hailed as evidence of his foresight and willingness to rehabilitate Igbos into the military hierarchy. Babangida had acquainted himself with Nigeria's leading intellectuals while attending senior courses at the Nigerian Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies, and he later appointed many of them to his government. He gave his regime intellectual legitimacy by appointing technocrats such as Africa's first Nobel laureate, Professor Wole Soyinka, as chairman of the Federal Road Safety Commission, the respected World Bank economist Kalu Idika Kalu, esteemed professor of virology Tam David West, Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, and Professor Chu Okongu were graduates of Harvard University, and renowned pediatrician Professor Olikoye Ransom Kuti. Even military officers who later joined the National Council of Ministers were technically inclined. Communications Minister Lieutenant Colonel David Mark was a signals officer with a background in military communications. Subsequent Minister of Works and Housing, Major General Kontagora, had a BSc degree in engineering, and Air Vice Marshal Nura Imam had a background in aeronautical science. Nigerians were easily seduced by Babangida's charm and were very slow to notice the differences between what he said and what he did. In the midst of the backslapping for Babangida, no one noticed that he retained the most detested measure of all from the Buhari era, the dreaded Decree 2 of 1984. The political prisoners who were detained under this draconian decree expected Babangida to repeal it. He not only retained it, but he also extended the detention period to 6 months and used it to detain those civil liberty activists and pro-democracy leaders who welcomed his rise to power. Moreover, the power to detain was given not just to the regime's deputy, but was also granted to the Minister of Internal Affairs and Inspector General of the Police. In the flurry of activities and grandeur promises, no one noticed that the war against indiscipline and anti-corruption drive launched by the Buhari regime was also terminated. Politicians who had been jailed for shocking acts of corruption were released. The controversy surrounding the tribunal's military composition made it possible for Babangida to release the jailed politicians without the public asking whether, irrespective of the nature of the tribunals, the defendants were actually guilty of the offenses they were convicted of. Nonetheless, Nigerians continued to be bamboozled by Babangida's charm. His gap-toothed smile, bonhomie, and constant wisecracks seemed to disarm even Babangida's most cynical skeptics. However, when it came to security and his personal survival, Babangida's Mr. Nice Guy image had clearly demarcated limits. He had a propensity for all-embracing security, reflecting his experiences as an expert coup plotter over 3 decades. Although it was presumed that Babangida had been involved in previous coup plots, the extent of the coup plotting was not known until 1992, when he confirmed in an interview with Tell magazine that he had been involved with every successful coup in Nigeria's history. I will admit it for the first time that I have been involved, except the January 1966 coup, in all the coup d'etats. In 1975, we were the prime movers of the coup here in Lagos. The Tell interview confirmed that no coup plot in Nigeria had ever succeeded without Babangida's participation. Not only was he the most prolific and successful coup plotter in Nigeria's history, but he had also helped to suppress all the coups that failed. Having climbed into government via a military coup, he never became complacent and reminded his colleagues that he did not hold a monopoly on coup plotting. He was continually watchful and anticipated a coup at any time. When I became president, there were about 23 of us who were the coup plotters at the time, and immediately that coup was successful, I sat the 23 of us together and said, "Congratulations, we made it. But remember one thing, just like we took up guns and toppled the government, we also have to watch because somebody would one day want to topple us, and this is because I understand the nature of the Nigerian person." It did not take long for Babangida's prediction to materialize.